What is up, everyone? It's Gage here, and today I got special guest, the Viking Spitfire Koda. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to finally be on your show. So thank you for having me.
Of course, I forget who made it, but like it was like a year and a half ago. Yeah, like you all did a video for the Vikings, and like what's it like to be a Vikings fan? It's like I felt your energy. I was like, I got to connect with her, and then that's how it kind of all started. And then later on, we connected, and I saw your content with D&D and all this Vikings content you make on TikTok. So I was like, I got to have her on the show, and I'm really glad to have you on.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it was Destin Klug who came up with the idea, and I'm very much all for whenever anyone is like, "Hey, Coda, do you want to do this?" I'm like, "Absolutely, I do. If I've got the time, I've got the energy, and I've got the mind power, I will find a way." I Yeah, I'm just so excited to be no one's like had me on a podcast just to like interview me before. Like I've been on podcasts to like talk about like football, but no one's really like had me on. Well, that's not true. There was one person who does a Vikings podcast. He's on TikTok. His name is Vikings Guy Day One. Awesome guy. His name's John. But yeah, no one's really like had me on a podcast to talk about like me specifically and not just Vikings football. So I'm excited to be doing this.
With all you do, I was like, this is going to be a very awesome and interesting podcast.
Yeah.
And I got to ask you, like, what got you in D&D, and did it take you long to kind of get the grasp of it? Because I know it can be a lot.
I don't think anyone will ever truly get the grasp of D&D. I think some people will say that they do, but I don't think they ever do because it's such an evolving system. I mean, when you consider, it started in the 70s and now it's just only on technically version 5, 6, depending on who you ask about 2024. I believe that 2024 is 5th edition point one. But I don't think you can ever really truly understand D&D. You can learn all the lore, but I don't mechanic wise there's just so much to learn, and that's really what makes it so fun. But I got into Dungeons and Dragons a very long time ago due to some old friends of mine, and then really because of a podcast called The Adventure Zone, which is done by three brothers and their dad. And I really really fell in love with it. And then for a while, I wasn't really playing because I didn't really have a whole lot of people to play with. And then when I was in college, I transferred to our LA campus. They had a Dungeons and Dragons club, and I was like, okay, yeah, like I miss playing D&D. I'll join in with that again. And from there, it exploded into making content. Such as my Goddess of Wisdom character on TikTok. From there, a couple of my college friends and I decided to make a podcast called Dice Rolls Can Kill. I've done charity streams where we played Dungeons and Dragons on like a live 24-hour stream, or it was a 12-hour stream, excuse me, to raise money and awareness. And then from there, I was asked to do a couple of other podcasts, such as Fallout Garden of Adam by Dicescape, which is done in the Fallout 2D20 system by Modifius. And then I'm in a podcast where I play my Goddess of Wisdom character with the Strangers Guild, which is a lot of fun. And I've got a lot of stuff in the on the stove, so to speak, for 2025, including running my own actual play game, which is done in the Marvel system. Yes, that's right. Marvel has their own tabletop RPG. It sucks and I love it. I'm obsessed with it. It's so bad. But yeah, it's funny because I've always considered Dungeons and Dragons to kind of be like a safe zone for me. For whatever reason, when I've been at my lowest, it's kind of been where I go to escape. And I mean, who doesn't do that with any form of fantasy or books or anything? But the nice thing about Dungeons and Dragons is that it's the closest you can get to escaping into fantasy without going into full on LARP. And I'm too broke to do LARP. So I instead waste my money on dice. But yeah, it's been something with me since I want to say like 2016, 2017 is when I got my start. So about 7 years now. And the fact that I'm slowly getting into a place where I can potentially make it my livelihood is really, really insane. And, you know, I come from an acting background. I've got 2 degrees in theater, 1 musical theater, 1 in straight theater. And I often tell my other friends who are actors who are like, "Oh, you play Dungeons and Dragons? That's so nerdy." It's like, "No, it's just long form improv, man, with like shiny rocks. That's all it is, and like a little bit of math." It's just so I think any actor worth their salt should, at one point or another, play Dungeons and Dragons. I think anybody looking for an escape for one reason or another should play Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm biased, so.
Well, I think it's a good way to connect, and I think it's really good for the mind because you have to act all these things out. Because it's not like a video game where you're like seeing everything happen for you. You have to use your mind for it, and so I think there's a lot of benefits to Dungeons and Dragons. Obviously, it's a lot of time, but I'd like if I could do it like once a week and I could find the right people, I definitely would consider it.
Oh,
It-
yeah. And it's a lot easier now too because, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, thanks to Stranger Things and the D&D movie, has become a little bit more mainstream. It's so much easier now with websites such as Start Playing, where you can connect with a DM and a table that way if you don't have anyone to play with. And there are like Discord servers dedicated to helping people find tables that they feel safe and comfortable with. And the nice thing too is that because it's no longer just a cis straight man neurotypical place anymore, community, there's so many wonderful and amazing things that can be done now. And because of a lot of the change that has happened in the Dungeons and Dragons community, in the newest player's handbook, they have finally introduced sign language as an actual official language because there there was such a long time where a lot of DMs wouldn't let players play mute or deaf or even blind characters because a lot of spells have like vocal components and they're like, well, you can't do the vocal components if you can't speak. Well, joke's on you. Now sign language is an actual language. So what's your excuse now? That means I can play my mute ranger because I love her and miss her so much.
I love that, and especially as like with sign language, I think that's great to add into D&D because I'm sure there's a lot of them that even though they can't use their voice, I'm sure their mind's working and they're and
Oh
having
yeah.
using be able to use that sign language to play the game they love. I think that's a great way to get more players into it and it's even more diverse.
Oh, absolutely agree.
Now, I wanted to how was it like going to the festivals? Because I saw you went to a couple of festivals that are like D&D themed, and
Yeah, so I've gone to a couple of Ren fairs. I went to my first ever Los Angeles Ren fair this last spring, which was so much fun. I went with a really dear friend of mine, Carson, Mystics and Mythos on social media, and it was a lot of fun. I actually got recognized for my Goddess of Wisdom content, which was insane. And then in December, at the beginning of December, I went to PAX Unplugged, which is kind of like the biggest like tabletop role playing game, card game, tabletop, anything, board game kind of convention. Also got recognized there by the wonderful Iron DM dad who has more followers than me, which was insane. I broke his glasses, but you know, and getting to do that and be around people who have similar interests to me. And surprisingly, you know, there's quite a lot of overlap between football and Dungeons and Dragons that I don't think a lot of, or even football and nerdum that I don't think a lot of people realize. And getting to be around that space and actually having people who recognize me go, hey, why did you stop making D&D content? Why did you stop doing your NFL quarterbacks as D&D class series? Because for the longest time, I had been kind of just catering to what a vast majority of my following wanted because that's what made me money, that's what got me views, and I wasn't in love with content creation anymore. And then I went to PAX and having people ask me, "Yo, I miss your D&D content. I miss when you merged the two together. Bring it back." It really sort of rejuvenated my want to be a D&D content creator, not just doing podcasts, but on my own private not private, but like my own personal channels. And so it, it's interesting because it was both settings, the Renaissance Festival and PAX, were kind of exactly what I needed in regards to reminding myself that people do watch my Dungeons and Dragons content, even if it's overshadowed by some of my followers who prefer football. And I just really need to like develop a backbone with it and really establish myself in that community so then I can gain the following that is both combined. I also got to meet Johnny Stanton. For those of you who are unfamiliar, he was an NFL player. He played for the Vikings on their practice squad and then went on to the Browns. And I got to meet with him and talk to him about all of that, which he's so amazing. He was so wonderful. But yeah, it was everything that I didn't know that I needed and everything that I knew I needed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel that. It's when I go to a place that I know I probably should go, but I don't feel like. I'm like, man, I don't want to do that right now. I don't feel like it. But when I get there,
Yeah.
I'm like, I really did need this.
Oh, yeah, and, like, up until that point, my imposter syndrome was kicking in because I got invited as a content creator, and a dear friend of mine over at Dicescape helped me get over there, and so, like, the whole time I'm going over there, like, I was so anxious because I'm like, "I don't belong here." Like, all of these other people, give so much more energy than I do, and then I got there, and I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt very welcomed, I felt very wanted, and, you know being neurodivergent because I have ADHD and bipolar depression, it can get really overwhelming when the imposter syndrome gets in your head or your rejection sensitivity dysphoria kicks in for whatever reason. And so all of that, plus being in a new place for the first time, plus the social setting and all of this stuff, it felt really overwhelming. And like leading up to the convention, I had been getting all of these emails from all of these different like game makers being like, we want to meet you, we want to meet you. And I'm like, wait until they meet me and they realize I'm a fraud. But then I got there and all of it just went out the window. It felt very much like home in a way, and I'm excited to see where 2025 takes me because like I said, I do plan on making more content or Dungeons and Dragons content. I do plan on trying to see where this path leads me because it's something that I've always been passionate about. And the Dungeons and Dragons sphere has really, or TTRPGs in general, have really opened themselves to become their own little industry, not just in the sense of making the games, but also in the sense of like playing them for people to consume. And I think a lot of people enjoy actual play podcasts of Dungeons and Dragons or your TTRPG of your choice because it's new, it's refreshing, you get to watch these players care for their characters as much as you do, if not more, and see their reactions live versus, on a TV show. I feel like, again, coming from a screenplay writer, coming from an actor, nowadays I don't get as connected with TV shows because, A, they take so long to make, and B, you can tell that by the third, fourth, fifth season, since they take so long, the actors have stopped caring. They're doing other projects that inform them artistically. And I think actual plays and podcasts centered around TTRPGs and Dungeons and Dragons are the new wave because people care so much. The players care so much, the viewers care so much. And like I said earlier, it's really become a safe place for neurodivergent people to find one another, to connect with one another, for queer people to find one another and to connect with one another. And of course, like any community, it's definitely going to have its issues, and there is still work to be done to open it up to our BIPOC and minority friends who deserve a spot at the table. Women absolutely still have to fight a little bit for a spot at the table, not so much as some other minorities, like I stated, but it's, and again, that's kind of where I feel at home because also with football, and being a femme presenting individual, I have to go through the same motions. And so if I just combine my two interests, it's like I'm fighting the same fight and I'm not using as much energy as like combating all of these different enemies from one side, if that makes sense weirdly.
Yeah, it's funny how like usually everyone's saying so. Like I had a couple of friends like, oh, aren't like usually sports fans jocks? Because like I'm very into anime. Now what really got me into it was Naruto because I really felt deeply with the character. Because growing up with autism, it wasn't very nice or very pleasant experience. But but I've really felt deeply connected to that character, and that's really got me into anime. And so I was really into sports, but I was also kind of an anime nerd, you know. So
Yeah.
there's definitely like a combination between the two, and like you said, D&D. There's definitely like some nerds that are some sports fans, and that can kind of connect together. It's not always
Yeah.
separate.
It's interesting too because it's like if you're a sports fan who's into nerd stuff, you're obviously the minority of that. But then you get treated really similarly by nerds if you are a sports fan, I have found. Like it's so funny because I feel like a lot of nerds detaste sports fans because they're like, oh, well, they treat us so badly. But then they go around and they treat sports fans the same way that sports fans treat them. And so, when you're people like us who are into the nerd things and to sports, you're sitting in the middle like, why can't we all just get along, man?
Yeah, exactly. Like guys, like we can all come together, and I'm sure there's some things to enjoy about sports, while the others I can enjoy things about fantasy. Like there's no need we could have a middle ground. There's no need to pick one side or the
Honestly.
other. It's like Harry Potter versus the freaking Lord of the Rings. Like that was always a fight when I was in school.
Right. For me, it was always the Hunger Games versus Harry Potter for whatever reasons. I'm very much a Hunger Games and Lord of the Rings person. I'll be honest, I tried to read the Harry Potter books. I don't like her writing style. And now given all the stuff that's come out about J.K. Rowling, I'm like, I don't think I'm missing out. I'll just stick to the movies. Thanks.
Yeah, I have a hard time reading the books. The movies are definitely I enjoyed a lot more,
Yeah.
and that's what I've always watched. I watched that since I was a kid, so just the books are, I'm watching everything I really need to know.
Right, exactly. And like they did it's not as well known, which is interesting to me, but similar to the Lord of the Rings, they did release extended editions that do add more to the story. It's so funny. Whenever my mom left town when I was growing up, we would have Lord of the Rings extended edition marathons, me, my dad, and my little brother. And then my mom is the first one to wake up in the morning. And so if they were doing the Harry Potter extended edition marathon on TV, then that's what we were watching. So it's like I was either watching one or the other growing up.
Oh, yeah, Harry Potter. Before I really got the anime, that was I probably watched Harry Potter like 50 times in my lifetime.
Yeah, same, same.
Oh man. Okay. Now directing more towards sports. What do you think is going to happen? The Vikings versus the Packers.
Oh man, I think it'll be another close game. Both teams are playing exceptionally well. The Packers, and like I'm sorry to all your Packers fans out there, I can already feel them hating on me for saying this. Everyone keeps saying that the Vikings are getting lucky in their wins. I have to disagree. I think the Packers are getting lucky in their wins. When you watch them play against the Seahawks, they got sort of a toned down version of Geno Smith in that O line, because I believe they did have some O line injuries for that game. You also have to consider Geno Smith getting injured. And I don't know, that Packers defense gets away with a lot. Whereas with the Vikings, we managed to play sort of that full strength Seahawks team. And I think part of it too is that Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores are going at so that I think they were going at that game specifically with like, let's put the gas at 80%, not 110 on the pedal, because they knew that we had the Packers and the Lions. They know how crucial these next two games are. But I do think it'll be another barn burner. The Packers are 2-7 all time at US Bank Stadium since its conception. So I'm not, honest to God, too concerned that they're going to win. I think it'll be close. I think I said on the One Bar and Lepigus show, I have it at 28-21 Vikings.
I like that. I think it'll still be a close game just because of the rivalry. But I saw this on Twitter. I forget who exactly said it, but it's like the Vikings versus Packers rivalry is not the same since Aaron Rodgers left. Like it just
No,
isn't.
it is not. Like no shade to Jordan Love. Absolutely, I hate saying this. I like him. I like his gameplay. I like watching him. He's an enjoyable Packers quarterback to watch, which is really hard for me to say, and I feel like I'm gonna throw up just saying that. But it's interesting because I feel like as good of a team as they are, because they are still a very good team, and they are still a very good team. There's almost a little bit of a disorganization to them now that it's really hard to like put my finger on, but something doesn't quite feel right about this Packers team anymore. And maybe it's because Jordan Love is still trying to get his footing in the league. Maybe it's because Matt LaFleur was a little bit of a puppet to Aaron Rodgers. Maybe it's because they kind of let the players do whatever they want. Jaheir Alexander suddenly not playing tomorrow or in 2 days. But yeah, I would have to agree. I don't know. You'll have to like find that tweet and send it to me because I 100% agree. And also on that, seeing that and like a lot of people are mad at the percentage because they think it's too high. I personally am surprised it's so low that 23% of the ticket sales for Sunday's game were Packers fans, supposedly. I'm genuinely surprised that it's only 23% because in the past, I think we have seen upward of like 40%. So I don't know. You're right. Something feels off about this Packers team now. Can't put my finger on it.
Like, what is going on? Like, the Lions now are like almost feel like the new Packers. Like, now it's like the Vikings versus the Lions, like how we were back with the Packers. And man, I was happy for the Lions at first, because they've sucked for so long, but the fans really changed that very quickly. I was like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah, no, and like so the Lions follow me on TikTok, which is a really cool thing. The Vikings don't. They need to get on that. But the Lions follow me on TikTok. And like the Lions organization themselves is made up, not the team, not the 53-man roster. I'll get to that in a second. But the organization itself is made up of some really insanely amazing people. They're very kind. The social media team and I have a very, very close relationship. They've helped me out in more ways than one. And it's interesting to me that such an organization that, in my opinion, rivals that of the Minnesota Vikings organization in regards to personnel can allow their fans to celebrate injuries, can allow their players to do the same is astonishing to me. Because after the TJ Hawkinson bit and that whole like we're coming for your kneecaps thing, I don't find that funny. As somebody who very, very well known and knowingly, well knownly struggled with a knee injury after being physically assaulted. I mean, personally, I don't find any kind of celebration of an injury all that fun, but especially a knee injury because yes, a lot of these guys do have top of the line medical care, but knee injuries follow you around, man. We have seen so many players after their knee injury not be the same. Teddy Bridgewater being the one that really comes to mind. But I don't know. It's they, in my opinion, the Lions themselves have absolutely become America's team, but the fans have 100% become what the Cowboy fans used to be, and I hate it, and I want it to stop.
Actually, I gave him a little nickname. I call him the Eagles fan base 2.0.
Oh my god, you're so right! No! Oh god.
I'll never forget that 2017 championship game. That's when I really, really became. I had a lot of hatred towards the Eagles.
I worked the Super Bowl. Not the Super Bowl, but some of the Super Bowl festivities. I worked some of the Super Bowl festivities for Best Buy because I was still living in Minnesota at the time and I still worked for Best Buy at the time. And the sheer amount of Eagle fans that you just know were harassing the Vikings fans when that game was in Philadelphia, who then came to Minnesota for the Super Bowl, who were shy, who were timid, who were too scared, purely because they were like, oh shit, we just treated these guys like garbage and now we have to go to their state and pretend like we didn't. And so we all just killed them with the Minnesota kindness. We were like, oh, hi, welcome to Minnesota. Is this your first time here? Oh, I hope you really enjoy it. How was your flight? Oh, is it good? Oh, I bet. Yeah, no. Well, have a fun time here at Mall of America. This is the Best Buy smart home experience. And oh, don't you know? Yeah, I'm a Vikings fan, but don't you worry about it. Water under the bridge. Oh, yeah. And I mean, we would absolutely go hard on the accent just because we thought it was funny. But like, it was that Minnesota passive aggression at them the whole time. Whenever there was an Eagles fan, so like if we had a Patriots fan walk through, it'd be like, "Hey, I'm Dakota. Like, welcome to the smart home experience. How's it going? How's your flight? Da 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 da." And then the Eagles fan would come through and be like, "Oh, hi, I'm Dakota. Welcome to the Best Buy smart home experience." It was so bad. I actually this is one of my favorite stories to tell. So, as many of you may know, you gauge your viewers, inside of Mall America, there is an amusement park. And the smart home experience that we were set up in was in the main rotunda, which is right next to the amusement park. And so they shut down the amusement park 2 nights, one for the Patriots, one for the Eagles. So that way the Patriots and their family, and then the Eagles and their family. And the night that the Patriots had it, I was the closing shift lead for our smart home experience. And so by that point, I had gotten really familiar with the National Guard guys, because there were National Guards everywhere. But I had gotten really close with the National Guard guys who were like around our area. And so I walked up as close as I could to the amusement park. And, I let Larry or Todd or whatever his name was know that I was just going that far. And the night that the Patriots had it, like I said, I walk up as close as I could because they had curtains up for like privacy reasons. But I walked up as close as I could to those curtains and I shouted at the top of my lungs, "Tom Brady sucks." And then the
Oh
Patriots
shit!
lost the Super Bowl.
Damn.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying. No one believes that I'm the reason why they lost the Super Bowl, but I'm just saying.
You must have disrupted it somehow.
I got in his head, man. I got into his head. That random voice floated over everything, and he was like, "Oh man, maybe I do suck." And then they lost.
I
So
had
you're
PTSD
welcome,
kicked
Eagles
in of the
fans.
last two games of that with the Giants in the Super Bowl.
Yep, yep, yep. You're welcome, Eagles fans.
Man, I remember that Super Bowl. I've never cheered for the Patriots once until that game. I was like, there's no way I'm cheering for the Eagles on this time. I don't give a shit if I don't care if they never won a Super Bowl or have 10 Super Bowls. Like, I'll never cheer for them.
I was like, I'm cheering for everybody to enjoy that brand new gorgeous stadium because I was like, I don't want a meteorite to hit it because it's beautiful and I love it. So I'm cheering for both teams to somehow lose.
That'd be the ultimate dream,
Exactly.
or like, hey, since both teams tie, let's bring the Vikings in there because they really should
Oh,
be
you
in
need a
there.
new team? Maybe we should have the Vikings play. So weird. Yeah.
Man, I really, really thought that was our year. Like even my daddy's been a fan for since he was like a teenager, and I was like, dude, after that that Minnesota Miracle, I was like, this has to
Yeah.
be the year. There's no way that type of thing happened and doesn't end in a Super Bowl win.
I, I it's so weird because whenever I have a really bad day, I go to that video. That video is something that for whatever reason has just been like when I'm at my lowest low, that's the video that I turn on. And so I actually got a tattoo of the date of the Minneapolis Miracle 01/14/17 on my ankle, and it's my semicolon tattoo. And I whenever I'm at my lowest, I watch that clip, There's something that just like gives me a lot of hope about it, even though obviously I know the outcome. But, I view the Minneapolis Miracle as almost a to be a Taylor Swift fan on man, um, almost an unintentional Easter egg to what was to come. What I mean by that is I view this entire season as the Minneapolis Miracle 2.0, especially when you consider what happened to us in the off season, when you consider what we were projected at win wise. And I was one of the only people on Vikings Twitter anywhere that was like, no, I think the Vikings could absolutely go far. I was so excited for Sam Darnold. I was vouching for him on TikTok, vouching for him on Twitter. I was one of the only people on Bikes Now for whatever reason that was like so sure that we were getting JJ McCarthy, and I was rallying for, I think originally it was 13-4 and then I moved it to 14-3. I genuinely truly believe that this year is our Minneapolis Miracle, if the Minneapolis Miracle was a season. Now, if that means that unfortunately we have another Philly episode, then you know what? Like, I'll just be proud of them for getting this far in general. But there's just something in the air, and I don't want to say what I feel like it's leading to because, you know, knock on wood, I'm like one of the biggest superstitious Vikings fans ever. But there's something that just feels different this year, and I can't put my finger on it. Yeah, but I don't know. This year to me personally just feels like the Minneapolis Miracle if the Minneapolis Miracle were defined as a season, you know?
One of the experts, I was watching this on, I'd say it was Good Morning Football, and someone said this feels like the Vikings feel like because they're just talking about, oh, the Vikings are the most disrespectful 13 win team. And it almost feels like 2017, like they're the most underdogs, and they came to playoffs and just absolutely dominated. They got through the games, including the Vikings, and it kind of feels like there's something. I don't want to say it either because last time I did, it didn't go so well. But there's something special going on. Like Sam Darnold, like I'm not going to act like he's elite. I don't truly believe that, but I feel like he's reached his highest potential. And I think he's good enough to win a Super Bowl. I really do, especially with our defense and Justin Jefferson. Like, let's not forget that guy is the best receiver in the league. I'll take any argument with that. And this feels like a special year for the Vikings. And I'm not going to say it because I was about to, but we'll see how it goes.
It just, well, and it doesn't, the NFC feels achievable, you know? The NFC, and I said this all off season, there's just something about the NFC that feels obtainable to me. And, you know, I was saying all off season that I think it's going to be the Packers and the Vikings jibing it out for second place in the NFC North. And so I'm glad that that's not true. I'm glad that we have handedly had this number 2 this entire season. I am so glad that I was wrong and that it isn't a fight to the end for the second seed. It's a fight to the end for the first seed. And you know, any given Sunday, anything could really happen. And with the way that this Lions team is slowly losing momentum, again, I don't want to say it because we're Vikings fans, but
We know what happens.
right, we know what happens when we see. I make the joke all the time that there are two things that I'm not a very superstitious person, nor am I a very like religious or spiritual person, but there are two things that I'm superstitious about. The first thing being theater, because what actor isn't superstitious? And the Minnesota Vikings. So
Yeah, there is something like I remember back. I think it was back during the pandemic. Like Mike Zimmer had like crystals, and this man definitely is not spiritual or anything like that. But man, being the Vikings for so long, he's like, there's something up. There's something suspicious about this, and he had like crystals around his office, and
no, I don't tell me that. I don't give me respect for him. Don't give me respect for him. Nuh-uh. I can't do that. Don't make me like him.
no, I don't think I could say like I used to like Mike Zimmer in the beginning until like the end where he started blaming the players, and even one of his interviews, like he's basically saying like kind of saying fuck the Vikings. I was like, bro, we gave you so many chances to succeed, man,
Right.
and you literally just gave it away.
That fight between him and Kirk will never not like that. It's itched in my brain. Like I think about it at least once a week. I'm like, damn, Kirk Cousins, the nicest guy ever. The guy who's currently praying with Michael Penix Jr. and is still being the upbeat Kirk Cousins that we know despite losing his starting quarterback job, almost beat the ever loving crap out of Mike Zimmer.
My guy, I was like, okay, are they like finally gonna get that reunited? Then it started out a fight. I'm like, oh shit. Okay, this is not turned out to be our year.
No, no, it's bad. It's bad. But like we have Kevin O'Connell now, so everything's fine.
I top like coach of the year. If he doesn't get it, I'm gonna be so mad. Like there's
Oh
no
my
like
god.
you're talking about Dan freaking the Lions head coach, Dan Campbell.
Dan Campbell, yeah.
I'm like, no, dude, he literally had a winning season last year. Freaking
What?
POC had straw. He had Nick Mullins and freaking Josh Dobbs. Like he went through 5 different quarterbacks, and he had a losing record last year. And then he comes back strong with Sam Darnold, which everyone was like, "No, he's going to suck. Vikings are going to win 6 games." And then look, we're fighting for #1 seed. Like, let's be real. It's KOC. If it's not him, then it's a snub.
If he doesn't get it, I'm walking to NFL headquarters. And I just want to talk. I just want to talk. But like the thing is that like don't get me wrong, love Dan Campbell. How can you expect to be coach of the year when you call for an onside kick with 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter? 12
I
minutes.
can't believe that still.
So, I'm sorry, you're telling me in this moment that you don't trust your second line, your second string, third string defense enough to stop the Bills, so you give them a better opportunity. I'm sorry, like it actually makes me mad as a football fan that he did that. So I'm sorry, like you can't sit here and tell me that Dan Campbell is coach of the year caliber when he pulls stuff like that. Absolutely, some of his other crazy plays do work out well. But even my thing is that the onside kick wasn't clever. It was just stupid. And to me, if you're doing, like I said, if you're doing that in the fourth quarter with 12 minutes left, you don't trust your defense. And to me, that tells me everything that I already know Kevin O'Connell has been preparing for week 18. That tells me that there is a weakness to this defense that has obviously been exposed by the Bills, and the key to week 18 lies in that Bills game. And I think too, when even the Bears are starting to get momentum against you, yikes. And I mean, sure, yeah, the Bears
Yeah.
still lost that game, but like there were times I was like, shit, if the Bears weren't incompetent, they could win this.
Yeah, I
Now,
saw that, and the head coach couldn't call a timeout. I'm like, they would have won that game.
they would have won that game. So if the Bears can win against you almost, then you're not a good team. And of course, people will probably be coming into the comments being like, well, the Vikings almost lost to the Bears. And it's like, well, first of all, that was earlier in the season. And second of all, we then went into their house and destroyed them. So,
Yeah, it wasn't a tight
like,
game. It was not a rivalry game.
no, it wasn't. They lost by 18 points. Like, and to me, it's like, or later in the year, those games should be a lot harder because you've been playing for longer. Our bye was in week 5. So for me, it's almost interesting that the Bears game for the Vikings, the second one, was almost a shutout, was decided by 8. There were 18 points that between the two teams. But the Lions barely got by. To me, it should be the opposite. You should be destroying teams like those by this point in the year. It should be easy because they're not good. And I mean, again, the Lions have all these injuries, and of course, you hear Lions fans talking about it, and my heart goes out to all of those injured Lions fans or Lions players. I will never be somebody that roots or cheers for injuries.
Yeah.
But this is a league that is a contact sport. Injuries are inevitable, and it's not an excuse, which is also why I don't care that the Packers just shut out the Saints. It's their second, third, fourth string guys. It's like, great, you shut out their practice squad. Now show me you can do that against a 500 plus team.
Yeah, exactly. And they beat the Lions have destroyed people, but like now with the injuries piling up, and they just lost their biggest running back, David Montgomery, and their defense is struggling with all those injuries. Yeah, they're not doing so well, and the Vikings are very healthy. Like we just got back. Ivan Pace is about to come back, so
Harrison
week
Smith
18
too.
is gonna look pretty nice.
Yeah, and like Harrison Smith had us all scared for a bit there with his foot. So glad to see he's back. And I mean, again, knock on wood, we've had a very lucky year in that most of our injuries have not hindered us too much. I mean, obviously, when we didn't have Cashman, that was a big blow. And I did watch Darisaw go down live. Was not fun. Was very much not fun. Um, but we're still managing to do it. So for me, it's like injuries shouldn't be an excuse. However, they're also, when you consider how many injuries the team against you has, I don't know if you can consider it a successful shutout if, again, you played against a practice squad team, just about.
And I want to give a shout out to Cam Robinson. Like that dude has done phenomenal.
Yeah.
Everyone was upset about the move when he first got traded. I'm like, guys, why are we upset? This is exactly what we need. We just
Oh
lost our
no, for
starting left
sure.
tackle.
For sure. And like everyone was like, we need more interior line help. We need more. And I'm like, no, we don't
Yeah,
need more interior line help. We need somebody on the offensive line or in the secondary.
yeah, especially when we just lost our starting left tackle. I forget if it was a torn ACL, but basically he's out for the season, and we just got Cam Robinson, who has done very well. He's developed over time, and I'm glad Kevin O'Connell is not a fan of like a fan GM. That's like, okay, let's trade 2 first-round picks for Dexter Lawrence. I'm like, like when I read
No.
that, I was like, there's no way someone actually said this.
No. Well, and like on top of that too, it's like you have to give a shout out to Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell for the way that they do these things, for the way that they manipulate teams to do what they want them to do. And like, yeah, like Cam Robinson has pulled a couple of penalties, which is what it is. Like but like you got to give him credit. He was traded and then played the next game. Like that's insane. Like, sure, maybe you could do that defensively. Maybe you could do that as a wide receiver. But as an offensive lineman, hello? Like,
Yeah. And I played offensive line back in high school, and I can tell you that is not easy at all because you got to
no.
learn the playbook, and there's certain plays where you have to swing out, and it's like, and it's a lot. It's a lot, especially when you don't know these guys. You just got there. It's a lot to process, and like I said, like he's on a like he hasn't been perfect. There's been penalties, but for the time he's had to kind of get ready, like he's done phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, and I know a lot of people on Vikings Twitter, not to discredit them, of course, are very worried about us having the bye if we were to get the number 1 seed. I disagree. I think we need it. I think the bye would be just what we need to tie this Vikings team up with a bow. I think it will help give Cam Robinson a break so he learns the playbook more. I think it'll give our injured players time to rest because Lord knows I'm sure a lot of players are playing injured right now like the fact that Harrison Smith did not play tells you that he is injured. That man has done insane things to ensure that he can still play. And so I think a bye, considering the fact that our bye was back in week 5, is absolutely crucial to making that Super Bowl run. And I think I know it can seem scary because I think a lot of people are concerned that we'll lose momentum. I disagree. If you think for 1 second that it'll lose the momentum, I think you need to go and you need to see the things that Kevin O'Connell has gone to at lengths to ensure that his players stop turning over the ball, to keep up the momentum, 2 years ago when we played in London, he was like, okay, now we're going back and we're playing a game the next day. And I went to that game. They were not tired. They were still there. So I think that bye week is going to be crucial for us. And I think it is obtainable.
Yeah, I think that it definitely is. Like we go against Packers, who I think is definitely beatable, very much
Yeah,
so.
for sure.
They've got lucky a lot of games, and they're going against us. It will be close because it's a rivalry game, but I think it's going to come down to week 18, and I think we're going to get it. Because I think the Lions are very beat up. They kind of lost momentum, especially with the Dave Montgomery injury. So I think it's very plausible we could get the number 1 seed. And I think that's the best road. Now, obviously, for me, the only thing that could make me not want to see is statistically wise. Sometimes teams slow down, but with this team, I don't see it slowing down. I don't doubt that for a second. With our coaching staff, and our players, there's no way in hell, and they're hungry. We didn't make the playoffs last year, so they're very hungry. So I don't see momentum falling at all.
Plus, you have to consider who we're playing this season for. You have to consider Kyrie. You have to consider he was with this team for a short amount of time. Unfortunately, I get choked up whenever I think about it. So I'm gonna try to move off of it really, really quickly here. And you know, I did say on the One Bar and Lupica show, it does kind of upset me a little bit that we didn't go out and get another cornerback, because I do think about the what ifs, and I do wonder, you know, had what happened not have happened, would our secondary be beefier? Would it be, you know, top 5, top 3? Of course, you can't really think like that because who knows, but when you consider how much this team cared for Kyrie in the short amount of time that he was there, Aaron Jones brings him flowers to his locker every single week. They put a locker up for him when they go to other teams. They travel with his jersey. They travel with his name tag. Yeah, a lot of teams have a lot to fight for. The Lions have to fight for the fact that they've never been to a Super Bowl. The Bills have to fight for the fact that they've never been to a Super Bowl. The Eagles had a rocky start and they're fighting for that. The Chiefs are fighting for God who knows what. Taylor Swift, like, shout out, but like I don't care. Sorry, not a Chiefs fan. Don't care. But there is something uniquely special about fighting to a championship for someone you love and you care about. It gives almost a We Are Marshall sort of vibe to this team. And I was thinking the other day, like, if we do make it to the Super Bowl, regardless on if we win or lose, there's going to be a movie about this Minnesota Vikings team one day. And I hope that I get to put my name on that movie somewhere, whether it's because I wrote it or whatever. But I think about it and I get really choked up because it's like, this is all for somebody who is so excited to be here. This is for somebody who would have killed it under Brian Flores's defense. Sorry, see, now I'm getting choked up. Regardless, but like, yeah, all these other teams have something to prove with this Super Bowl. Whether it's three-peating, whether it's Nick Sirianni is not as much of an asshole as we all think he is. Spoiler alert, he is. Whether it's actually making it to the Super Bowl or winning a Super Bowl for once, but we have something really special. And that, I think, is what will keep this momentum going, is that emotional aspect, because this is an emotional football team. And you know that based on the way that Justin Jefferson talks about the locker room. You know that based on how you can hear when Kevin O'Connell's voice cracks when he gives his locker room speech. This team is, I think, the most coherent Minnesota Vikings team that we've ever seen. And there is no way that one bye week will make them lose momentum. And I get, you know, maybe people are scared because we had our bye this week and then we lost to the Lions, we lost to the Rams. That's understandable. But I think you also have to acknowledge those teams that we played against after our bye. I mean, we played against the Lions at their prime this season. The Rams were fully healthy when we got back, and, you know, it was a short week. Not to mention, SoFi is not my favorite stadium ever. Definitely have some beef with that stadium. But I don't think that's happening this time around. I don't think there's going to be an L after a bye week this time around. Unless it's the Lions, then I think that they'll get an L. If they get the bye week, then they'll get an L. But if it's us, no L's here. All W's.
You said perfectly. Like Kyrie Jackson, I actually shared a video clip someone made on TikTok, and it was just beautiful because it kind of shows that Kyrie Jackson really is a guy linked to the Vikings this year. He's almost like the guardian angel of the Minnesota Vikings, and everyone has a little bit more at stake. Like, we got to do this for Jackson because he couldn't be here with us. We got to do this for him. And reading about how he died, it was very shocking, and especially with his family's going through, like, it's very difficult. And I'm sure it's difficult on the team because that's her brother, and there's a little extra fight in this Vikings team. And I think that's going to be the extra drive in this season. And it has been. There's a reason we're not going 9-10 this year. There's a little extra oomph this season, and the
Right.
Vikings are going to go out fighting, regardless if we don't make the playoffs or not. So it's going to be it's been a very special season.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I also kind of want to talk about your experience at SoFi Stadium because I remember you going to that game.
SoFi Stadium, when I get you, SoFi Stadium. Yeah, I went to SoFi for the Eras Tour, and it was fine. Like, no complaints or anything. It was the Eras Tour, perfect, wonderful, amazing. Shout out. Going for the Rams versus Vikings game sucked. It sucked. I went with my grandparents. My poobah, who's a Rams fan, has never gone to an NFL game. My bubby has been a longtime football fan and has never gone into SoFi, and so I wanted to treat them to a game. And so we get in, and we get in, it's fine. And we're like, okay, we have to figure out where we're sitting because we see sections that are near where we're sitting, but we don't see the section that we're sitting in. So we ask somebody, and they go, oh yeah, it's over that way. And so you have to there's a section of the stadium it's like the Ticketmaster VIP section, and only people with that kind of ticket can go there. And so you have to kind of like go around, but you can't go around entirely. It's really confusing. So we start going around, and somebody stops us, and they're like, where are you going? And we're like, oh, we're going to this section. And he goes, actually, it's that way. Okay, so we go around again. Where are you going? Oh, we're going to this section. Yeah, you have to go back that way.
Oh, God.
20 minutes. 20 minutes. We missed the national anthem. We missed the player introductions.
Oh,
And
shit.
my poobah is a Puka Nakua fan. Like, I got him a Puka Nakua jersey for his birthday. So we missed the player introductions. We missed the national anthem. And so finally someone is like, oh, actually it's right there. And so it was right where we had walked into. It was right where we had walked into. So we sit down, and our seats were only like a couple rows down from the entrance. We're like, are you serious? So we get to our seats. Luckily we don't miss kickoff. We get there for kickoff. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. One of the Rams players goes down, and Vikings fans start a skull chant at that moment. I started yelling at the other Vikings fans in my section. And at that moment, I'm like, we're going to lose because we did that. Because, sometimes you get those feelings. I got one of those feelings. And I'm a very respectful football fan, especially when I'm in somebody else's house, so to speak. And so, the rest of the game goes by fine. And like an idiot, I put my purse around my chair, not thinking anything of it because I've gone to Vikings games. Shit like this does not happen at Vikings games. And if it's happened to you, then I retract my statement. But my experience at Vikings games, I've never had anything of mine stolen, even when I left it somewhere. I typically will have somebody running after me being like, hey, you forgot this, So I put my purse around my chair because it was like an overbody and it was uncomfortable and whatever. It gets stolen. And again, I blame myself. Like, it was a stupid move on my part. And so I find out that it gets stolen. And so I go to customer service, and I'm waiting because there's someone in front of me. And those people finally finish up and they walk away. And I'm waiting for them to be like, hi, can I help you? Because that's what they do at customer service. And these two women just stare at me. And they're like, can we help you? And I'm like, yeah, I need to report a missing purse. And they're like, okay, do you want to file a report? I was like, yeah, yes, I do. So we file the report. I give them the details, and I'm really disappointed because it was like a limited edition Pride bag, like a Pride Vikings
Yeah.
Pride Vikings bag that they had at Pride a couple of years ago. So obviously you can't get your hands on it anymore. And it had like all of my stuff in it, like my wallet and not my keys. Luckily, like I was smart but like it had my ID, it had my credit cards, so it sucked, but so we filed a report, and they were like, okay, we filed a report, so like we'll let you know. And I was like, okay, is there someone that I can contact to like keep tabs on it? And they were like, we don't have that phone number. How do you not have that phone number? And so I go
Isn't that
home,
like the whole thing?
right. Exactly. And so I go home, and, after every football game, the league will send you, or the team or whatever will send you like tell us about your experience. And so I straight up told them about my experience. And now the last time I told a team about my experience was when I went to the Bucks Vikings season opener, and I was still on crutches. I told them about my experience on Twitter, and then I told them about my experience in that thing. And I now have 2 signed helmets from the team, which they did not have to do. They did not have to do that. But I now have a signed Christian Darrisaw helmet and a signed Justin Jefferson helmet because the team wanted to make sure that I was taken care of after all of that. Like, how sweet. That is genuinely the kindest thing I think a team has ever done for me. And I have that woman's phone number in my phone, and she's like, let me know when you go to a Vikings game in Minnesota so I can say hi and all that stuff. Did not receive a response from the Rams. And I reached out to them through Twitter. I made a TikTok about it, and I even emailed them. Have received nothing for their poor customer service. Come to find out, a couple weeks ago, like at the end of November, my purse was in fact stolen and was in Bakersfield, California. So it was north, like 3 hours north of me. So
Yeah.
luckily everything was like canceled, so they didn't steal any of my money or anything. But yeah, Bakersfield, California. Like, what? Okay. Sure.
Man, it's great, and I can imagine going for that type of experience. Like SoFi Stadium definitely does not sound like a place that any fan would want to go, especially the Bojan
And
fans.
no, and like I had heard from other Vikings fans who went to the game too. They were like, "Yeah, it was not enjoyable for me." Like they also didn't have a good time, and it's like a hard stadium to navigate. So I was supposed to meet up with Jason. I was supposed to meet up with Destin Baker. Didn't get to meet up with any of them because the stadium is so hard to navigate and they're so weird about leaving your seat. But I will give a shout out to the food service employees. Probably the fastest I have ever gotten in and out of a line with food at a stadium ever. It was impressive. It was very impressive.
Yeah, it's yeah. I'm at least the food went quickly, So at least there's
Yeah.
not it's not all negatives. But like I went to a Vikings game. It was in Jacksonville. Even though it's not like a super like fancy stadium, I really enjoyed it. And I think like all these fancy stadiums are a little bit too complex.
Oh
Besides,
yeah.
obviously, the Minnesota Vikings Stadium, Bank Stadium. Um, but like I just keep me straightforward. Don't make it all complex and
No.
confused to get through. Like I've been to Buccaneer Stadium since I live here in Florida, and the Jacksonville Jaguar Stadium, the Miami Dolphins, and their stadium's pretty straightforward, and it actually was a good time. But yeah, they need to make it a little bit less complex, and
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. And like train their employees as to where things are and
yeah,
how to
exactly. Like
talk
everyone's
to
like,
people.
oh, go this way, go this way. It's like, okay, I thought you guys worked here. What's going on?
Right. And then it turns out it was literally right in front of us when we walked in. It just there wasn't a sign for that's the other thing. There wasn't a sign for our section. So it's like, how are we supposed to know that that was our section, man? But I don't know.
Now, I've never been to US Bank Stadium, so how is that kind of compared to SoFi Stadium?
US Bank Stadium, love of my life. She is beautiful. I mean, the only 2 times I've been on crutches. So I need to go and I'm not on crutches. But even still, the service is amazing. The customer service people know what they're talking about. I've only ever had one bad interaction with an employee there. But I love it. She's beautiful. She is state of the art. It's really easy to navigate. It's easy to find your seats. It's easy to like just get like overwhelmed by how beautiful she is. Like the glass is so gorgeous. The big doors when they open is awesome. It snows in the stadium during the pregame show, which is so cool. It's my favorite part that it snows. I
Oh
didn't know it
wow!
snowed when I went the very first time I went to the Vikings or Bears Vikings game in 2022, and I didn't know it snowed in the stadium, and it started snowing, and I was freaking out. It's like suds, like it's like soap suds, so it's not actual snow, but it's so magical because it floats like snow. Um, and like the food is good. I mean, it's still like a sporting event, so the food is expensive, but
Yeah,
it's like you get your bang for your buck. It's just overall like there's not a bad seat in the house either. I don't think I have seen anyone ever complain about going to US Bank Stadium because it's just she's beautiful. There's nothing else to really say. She's just a well-designed stadium. The bathroom situation is really easy to navigate. The food is good. the staff is respectable and or respectful and kind and knowledgeable, and I no notes. 10 out of 10. Excellent.
Yeah, I've read about it and I've always wanted to go use Bake Same. It's my goal to go there next year. I'm
You're
gonna
gonna
try to save up
go?
some money because I'm currently moving to Orlando, so I'll be
Oh, nice.
yeah, doing some. I have someone I'm working with that's sponsoring my podcast, and She does a lot of things for autism community, so trying to be more in person with the community because I've been doing a lot of stuff online. But I was like,
Yeah.
if I can get there, because waiting until next year. But I was like, why don't I just get there now, and I can like be more physically involved. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
one of
I
my
get
biggest
that
reasons
entirely.
going there.
Yeah. Yeah, I got I'm gonna show it on your podcast. I got this guy today, because I'm kind of thinking the same thing with like my content creation. It's like now that things are really taking off with it, maybe I should start doing things to like actually further that business. So I get that entirely.
Yeah, it's and the community is always extremely inviting.
Yeah,
Now obviously they're different communities, but from what I've heard about D&D and obviously the Vikings, those communities are always like very welcoming.
yeah. Oh, for sure.
I'm not sure if you have it yet, but do you do stuff like do you push your content on YouTube? And 'cause I know you post content like TikTok.
I'm with the TikTok ban looming. I'm trying to decide what I want to do. I some people are trying to convince me to do Instagram Reels, but the issue with Reels is that the algorithm isn't the same. And obviously with YouTube, again, the algorithm isn't the same with that either. And a lot of my D&D podcasts are on YouTube, but the issue is that my content doesn't lend itself well to a YouTube platform, like especially the skits that I do for like the
Yeah.
Goddess of Wisdom and D&D. So, I I had a Twitch channel that unfortunately I had to stop doing because my current computer, the one that I'm streaming on now, um, the CPU is just it's a MacBook Air and they don't last as long because they're so thin, so they overheat really quickly. And so I wasn't able to stream anymore. Well, now that I've got this guy, I can start streaming again because I know a lot of people have been wanting me to start streaming again. So that will be happening hopefully starting next year. I'll be streaming again. So Twitch, definitely. YouTube, I have to see. I have to see what'll lend itself well to a YouTube platform. And YouTube might be something that I have to wait until I have like a dedicated space to recording. Because right now I'm recording out of my room, which is why you see my dog on my bed over there. Um, but YouTube might have to be that thing where I wait until I have a dedicated room specifically for recording and content and whatnot before I can really do because like I live with my grandparents. I love them dearly, and I'm so lucky that I do live with them. I'm in a very, very, very fortunate situation, but with living with my grandparents. But the issue is that it's not really my own space, and so they come in here from time to time, talk to me, and all that stuff. And so once I get a dedicated space for content creation that isn't just my bedroom, that's like a working space, maybe I'll start looking into like a YouTube platform. I definitely use it right now to promote my screenplay writings and my short films, which are on YouTube. So you should all check those out. But yeah, so we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I was like TikTok. I've always had a hard time with the algorithm because I've used YouTube for so long. Now I'm
Yeah.
not YouTube's very hard to get like views. Like I put a lot of content out there, but it doesn't get as many views as it really should. And I've done like upon hours of research, and it's still like whack. I'm
Yeah.
like, damn, I'm gonna have to like do something different here. Even the shorts, I can only do 60 seconds. I'm like, man, that's not even enough time to really get into something.
It really isn't. Like someone told me they were like, you should look into YouTube Shorts. And I'm like, most of my Goddess of Wisdom and like my NFL quarterback videos are 2-3 minutes long. Because like I have to like with the Goddess of Wisdom, like it's improv, so I don't dictate. I could probably write a script, but it just doesn't feel it doesn't feel as genuine to do my Goddess of Wisdom content with a script. So I go in at improv. It helps keep me sharp. But like the NFL quarterback series, it won't lend itself well to a shorts. I mean, maybe I could like move over that series to YouTube, but I feel like it's so niche that the YouTube algorithm would just hate it. It'd be like, why are you giving us this?
Yeah, it's been giving me headaches. I've tried to like make it to a regular video, but it's kind of like puts me more act as a short. It just none of it works.
No.
I'm gonna try. I'm trying something different. My shout out to Lena, my new designer. She does a lot of the designs on my thumbnails and does my shorts and a lot of editing. So I'm working with her right now to kind of see if we can do something to get more views. But it's been kind of wild. So it's
Yeah.
YouTube is a beast. I'm still fighting after years of doing it. So
Oh
it's a
yeah.
lot of work.
And I feel like too, like listening to YouTubers, even like Jacksepticeye, who I love dearly, talk about the algorithm and the way that it's even hard for like big creators on this app or on that site to like really get anything going, because if they say one word, if they say one thing, it's like, the algorithm isn't going to push you. Sorry. And it's like, well, why? And it's like, we don't know. We're just not going to do it. I hate that. I hate that. Like, at least with TikTok, I'm able to be like, okay, I understand why this video didn't do well. I didn't post it at the right time and I used too many hashtags, or I said a certain word, so the algorithm isn't going to push it. Um, and the nice thing too is that the algorithm will also kind of push you based on how many followers you have. And I'm last time I checked, less than 100 away from 15K. And so, with that is going to come the algorithm having more incentive to push me to people, because it's kind of 15K is kind of like that milestone you have to hit on TikTok for people to really start seeing you often. But again, it kind of sucks that it's happening when it's happening, because it's like, well, TikTok might
Yeah,
not
because
exist for
it's
me
on its
soon.
way out now. But yeah, that's why it's hard because YouTube is like now it's going to be the more long-standing platforms, but it's one of the hardest to really get anything going. I've done you. I've been this podcast I've had for about probably like it's probably been like 7 to 8 months. And it's been progressing pretty great, but even that I'm less than 50 subs. So it's like very hard to do. And I
Yeah.
probably put in like 75 videos and upon many hours of editing and things like that and find out what works best and very professional thumbnails that been better since I've not been doing them anymore. Because I was like, okay, let me see what I could do. I'm just gonna make I'm so basic with designing, it's not even funny, and so
Right.
yeah, Lena has definitely helped a lot with that. And even with that, it's been still difficult to get views. Like one thing I've been kind of doing, it's been able to get my algorithm that more is like I share in Vikings groups and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's still a lot of difficulties with it. So it's
Yeah, and, like, it's interesting too because, like, I look at, like, Instagram, and so, like, a lot of my following does not carry over from TikTok to Instagram, and so, like, when I promote things on Instagram, it's, like, for people who really, like, actually care. And then, it's interesting, like, trying to promote anything on TikTok because their stories are not the best, and it's like, how do I yeah, it's I don't know, social media is just, like, a very very weird monster that we are all sort of us content creators are all sort of bound to. It's almost like a horrifying warlock pact in a way.
Yeah, and you're still working down the levels, and you've been at this for
Yeah.
a long time. And you're like, you almost want to like throw the remote across the room, but you're like, fuck, I gotta get through this.
It's so interesting too because it's feel like every time I'm this close, something happens to push it further. So like when I first got 10,000 followers about a year ago, um they just changed the rules for how many views you have to have in order to get on the creator fund. And then I got on the creator fund and then I wasn't getting any views because obviously they don't want to pay as many people. And now it's like I'm getting 15K and it's like, sorry, this app is about to become illegal in your country soon. And that's scary
Damn.
because TikTok pays us out on the 15th of every month and it gets banned on the 19th. So I'm really nervous that I'm not going to get paid out because I don't know if we'll get paid once TikTok is no longer on the app stores. I don't know how that works. Everything I've seen says I should still get paid, but who knows, man? Who knows?
Yeah, Yeah, it's unfortunate people that put a lot of work in TikTok and now it's kind of ending. I was TikTok was a little too much for me. Like I enjoyed some of the stuff on there, but one thing I didn't like about it, as soon as I open it up, is like, well, videos are coming in at once. I was like, okay, let's slow down a little bit. Now I
Yeah.
need a minute to breathe.
I know, and now they do ads now too. Like you open the app and it'll be like an Amazon ad. I'm like, I don't care, just show me the memes.
Yeah, exactly. Let's start slow and let's enjoy some memes and then work our way up.
Yeah, and then
You
work
know.
our way into like the conspiracy theories and that Boots poem that like I am obsessed with and all that stuff.
Oh man, yeah, it's I like I'm a little into football memes too, and I have to hold back sometimes because I like my brother is a Vikings fan, but he isn't as a big of Vikings fans because he's kind of got into other sayings, and I'm like, okay, I gotta hold back. I gotta stop talking about
Yeah.
football because I end up talking way too much about it.
I get the same exact way. My poor grandparents like will listen to me talk about like football and then instantly like Dungeons and Dragons, and I feel so bad for them because it's like one or the other, pick one. And it's like no, my brain works on both. Damn it.
It's when you're interested in something like for a while, like for a couple months, especially after the show came out, I was really on Fallout. I just kept
Oh, I
talking
need to
about that.
watch it. I still haven't watched it, which is so bad of me because I literally play in a Fallout game. I still haven't watched it. I also have played like maybe 20 minutes of Fallout 4 and got really mad, and then I had to return it because I got really mad. So I've never beaten Fallout 4 or any of the Fallout games, actually.
Oh, Fallout 4 was such an emotional game. I'm not gonna spoil it for you, but it's
No,
a
it's okay.
very
You can.
emotional story.
I'm never gonna play it. So I got to one point and they killed my dog, and I got so mad that I returned the game because the dog didn't
Oh
have plot
shit.
armor. So I was like, "No, I'm not doing this. I'm not no. I'm not doing this." My dog, so my character Ruthie in Dicescape's Fallout Garden of Adam, she has a dog meat. His name is Sputnik, and we gave him plot armor. I was like, if anything happens to Sputnik, I'm quitting. So the dog has plot armor in our game. So
Yeah, yeah, and, like I feel like that's like friendly fire. You can't be doing that.
no, don't kill the dog. If you are a movie, a game, a TV show, book, anything that kills the dog, just know I hate you.
John Wick did it right. John Wick did it right. He wasn't messing around.
I can't watch that movie because I know that it happens and I can't do it. So like I know it's a good movie, but because the dog dies, I'm like, sorry. Like the same thing with I Am Legend. Won't watch it. Can't make me. Nope.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's hard when you know what's gonna happen. That's yeah, it's hard because I'm like, no, do not kill the dog. And the worst
Oh, and
part in
they
John Wick,
do.
it's the puppy. It's literally a damn puppy, and
Can't
you're
do it.
no.
Can't make me.
It didn't even grow up. And
Right.
that. Oh man. Now to kind of finish things up, I want to kind of finish off with like your journey to where you are. But that kind of led you to gain the nickname from Paul Allen of Spitfire.
I don't know where it came from. I'll be so honest with you. So, he had Thor. Thor is a really dear friend of us at Bikes Now, and Thor goes on all the time. Surprisingly, Thor and I haven't like done an episode together. I need to talk to Dustin about that because Thor and I were like the two people who were like JJ McCarthy. Regardless, so Thor did an episode an interview with Paul Allen on his K-Fan show. And he gave us a shout out on the K-Fan show. And Paul Allen was like, oh, yeah, they're doing really good things over there. And so I was in charge of the Twitter at the time for Vikes Now. And, I tweeted out saying, hey, thanks, PA. That's really nice. We'd love to have you on the show. And Paul Allen was like, yeah, I'll come on the show. We were like, oh my God, Paul
Oh
Allen's going to be on the
shit.
show. And so I was like freaking out. I was like, okay, like Paul Allen does a lot of the different podcasts. Like I need to make sure that I ask him like very different questions that he's never gotten asked before. And so, we connected and excuse me. It went really, really well. And so then he had Dustin from Bikes Now on KFan. And I don't remember what exactly I was doing during that day. I think I was recording Dice Rolls Can Kill. I may have been recording something else. But I'm checking our Slack channel for Vikes now, and Dustin says, "Yeah, it was a good episode. Can't wait for Coda to listen in." And I was like, "What do you mean you can't wait for me to listen in? Like, what does that mean?" And so somebody then randomly sends in a video clip of the thing, and I'm like, "Okay." And so I click play, and it's a clip of Paul Allen talking about one of their producers. And he's like, "Yeah." Paul Allen goes, "Yeah. The producer would be a great addition on your show. I think he'd love you guys, and he would especially love that little Spitfire out Southern California way." And Dustin goes, "Oh, you mean Dakota?" What? 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 And then I get like a whole bunch of text messages from my family who live in both Minnesota and Wisconsin being like, "Did Paul Allen just shout out Dakota? Is that what just happened?" And I was like, "That's me. That's me."
Yeah, when I heard that, I was like, that fits Coda so perfectly. Like right there.
And he calls me that too. So I have his number. We text from time to time. And it's so funny because I'll text him and like I'll just be like, "Hey, hope you're doing well, school bikes or whatever." And he'll go, "Spitfire." And it's so funny. So like I'm curious if I'm saved in his phone as Spitfire, because I think I am. I want to say that I am, but he also gives the vibe of somebody that like saves your full name, you know? So it's either it's my full name or it says Spitfire. I don't think it's one or the other. But or like whenever he tweets out at me, he'll say hashtag Spitfire though. I don't know what that means, but I'm like, listen, I'm here for it. So yeah, after that, I was like, well, I have to make this my whole brand now. Like it has to be my whole brand because when Paul Allen gives you a nickname, that's your life. Like that's who you are. I'm the Spitfire from SoCal now. Like it's on all of my social media stuff. I'm like Spitfire from Southern. I don't think it's on TikTok. It's not on TikTok, but it's everywhere else. And like there's even a clip on my TikTok of me like because every time I listen to it, I just like I geek out. So there's a video of me geeking out about it on TikTok. But yeah,
Wow.
it's
That like it fits you very well, you know. And Spitfire is an awesome nickname. You know, when I
thank
think of
you.
Spitfire, I always think like a dragon. That's kind of why I made the thumbnail like a dragon spin fire, and like that. Like, but you when you yell at other Vikings fans for cheering for an injury, that's where the nickname comes from.
I am, and it fits so well too. Like you say, my family nickname is Scrappy. I don't know where it comes from, but it's my nickname. I'm Scrappy, and so I told him after he gave me that nickname, I was like, "Did you know that my family calls me Scrappy?" And he's like, "I did not, but it fits." I'm like, "It's just who I am, man." I once jumped over a fence once during a show that I was in. Never did it again because it was all adrenaline. But someone told me that I was scrappy for jumping over that fence, and I was like, "Listen, I'll take it. I'll take it."
Oh man, what was kind of your journey becoming a content creator? Like the first time you made a video, you're like, okay, let's just give this a shot.
Oh man. So I started content creation um back in 2018. Back when TikTok was Musically because I was really into cosplay. And somebody I no longer associate with um was well-known, emphasis on was, they no longer post on TikTok for whatever reason. Um was a well-known TikTok creator for cosplay. And so I was like, well, if they could do it, then so can I. So I started doing cosplay. And then I moved to New York City and I started talking about Marvel and I started talking about my opinion of Marvel from an actor point of view because I was acting at the time. And then trying to think of like how much information about myself I want to give on your podcast. I went through a really rough breakup. And so I started using it as an outlet to let out my emotions. And so I would lip sync and act to audios. And then from there, I started doing um, more lip syncing and I started slowly just doing NFL football content. Just Vikings content, whatever, and it started gaining traction. And so then Um, in last off season 2023, during the off season I was like, there's nothing for me to do, there's nothing for me to talk about, so I turned to Dungeons and Dragons. I was like, okay, I've tried making Dungeons and Dragons content in the past and it didn't really go over well, but like I don't know what else to talk about, so I'll talk about this. And at the time I was unemployed, I didn't really have a whole lot going on for me, and so I started doing Dungeons and Dragons content and it started taking off. And so then I started doing Goddess of Wisdom content and it started taking off. And so then, you have my football content and my Dungeons or my Goddess of Wisdom content, both, or my Dungeons and Dragons content and my football content, both taking off. And from there, I got invited to do all these podcasts and to work with all these amazing creators and networks. But it's interesting because I got the following I did on Twitter purely just by being myself. And I remember Dustin asking me to be on Vikes Now for the first time after I got fourth place for best newcomer. He asked me on and then he just kept asking me on. And so now, I try to do videos as often as I remember to. But life happens. And yeah, it never was something that I really did because at first when I did cosplay content creation, it was because, oh, I want to be famous. But then it really turned into more, when I was living in New York City after my breakup, it turned more into an escape for me, for my emotions. And it stayed that way. And then it morphed into just talking about things that I love, because for so long, before I really was involved in content creation, I just was at a place in my life with the people I'd surrounded myself with where it felt like I had to be interested in the things that they were interested in.
Mm.
And it was hard for me to feel truly a part of the things that I was doing. It felt really hard for me to fully feel like I could be myself. And at the time, I didn't know that. I thought that there was something missing, but I never really could quite put my finger on it. Now, that I'm 4, 5, 6 years removed, it's a little bit different. I can use hindsight. But as my following went up and up and up, and there was, like I said earlier, there was a little bit of a time there where I was really just posting because I was like, well, it makes me money, so who cares? But then, I went to PAX, I got to talk with my friends, I got to talk to people who know me, and I was reminded of why I do the things that I do, why I do content creation. And so it's always really just been an escape. It's always been a way for me to either work on my acting skills, to talk about something that for so long in a previous relationship of mine I wasn't allowed to talk about. And it's always been a way for me to connect the things that I love to one another, because you can very easily connect acting to football and football to TTRPG and TTRPG to acting. And everybody's journey is different. That goes for like everything ever. Especially, as an actor, I know that better than everybody. You'll find different ways to success. And I think why I've stayed at it and why I continue to grow is my dedication to it. Even when I take breaks, even when I get burned out, I always come back because it will always be a place where I can go to be myself and to feel like myself. The interesting thing with that, however, is that I do have to remind people a lot. Like the part of me that you see on the internet is not all entirely me, and I try my best to give my true, authentic self, because that's part of who I am. I will always try to give who I am authentically. But again, going back to like having ADHD, having bipolar depression, I I have to put up a little bit of a mask. I have to put up a little bit of a version of me that is easy to digest, because in the past, there are some people that can't truly, for lack of a better term, swallow the full authentic me. And so if I do the authentic me to a point where it doesn't feel fake, it doesn't feel like I'm putting on a show, but I'm still saving specific parts for myself, it helps with keep me from burning out, but it also helps me grow in content creation, and it continues to stay the thing that I love, if that makes sense. So it's always been a way to reconnect with myself, with the things that I love, and to help me let out emotions. And like I said, you can't be inauthentic when you're doing that. You have to be authentic. Um, but I'm excited for where 2025 is taking me in regards to content creation. I've got a lot of really big plans, both for myself and for the different networks I'm a part of. Um, I will be running my first ever Marvel multiverse game for Dice Rolls Can Kill in the Marvel system, which I'm very excited about. That'll be coming out March 28th. I'm working with Dicescape to do a couple of different shows with them. I'll be in, I think, 2 or 3 of their shows. One of those shows I'm helping conceptualize with their head storyteller, Kylie. I can't say anything other than that. As much as I want to. I don't even know if I was allowed to say that. I hope I was allowed to say that. Kylie, if I'm not allowed to say that, you can just take me out, I guess. But but I'm really excited, even with the impending doom of a potential TikTok ban. It's not going to stop me from making content, because I think I was built for content creation. I think the ADHD lends itself well to content creation. So, yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it did, and yeah, I really appreciated kind of hearing your journey of sayings, and you like, and I think that's another reason why you get the naming Spitfire, because you're a fighter. You know, you went through a lot. You know, I'm not going to push it, because we all have our things to deal with, and things that, like for me, I like everyone to talk about what they want to talk about. I mean, as much as they can, but
Yeah.
there's some things that are just private, and there's still things that we're all kind of accepting, in our lives, and as far as masking, a lot of people, even with autism, it's a hard thing to fully unmask. It's a process. I've been going through that majority of my life. Really being on my authentic self. Because for a long time, I really couldn't be my true self.
Right.
Because no one really understood, and growing up was definitely not ideal. And it can be very difficult for everyone that, in a way, all of us in some sense act. We put a mask on and we're putting on a face, but behind corners, we're all struggling with something.
I have
So,
to Oh, sorry.
oh no, you're good. You can go ahead.
I have to remind myself a lot of the time too, which kind of is like the other side of things, is that I also have to remind myself that the mask that I do present online is not who I am. Because I feel like sometimes all you do is you put on that mask, and it can be really easy to forget that that's not who you truly are. And I think that's, some of the ways that I experience burnout is, um, I get so comfortable presenting myself the way that people want me to present, or the way that people are familiar with me presenting, that I convince myself that that is me. And then it turns into a really bad time, because then it's like, wait, that's not me. What the heck? Um, and it's interesting too, because as a survival job, I'm a part-time drama teacher at an elementary school. And it's interesting because then there I have to have an entirely different persona. Like, the kids there don't know that I have this whole other life where I'm a content creator. And I do that for a very specific reason, because one, I don't want my kids listening to some of the podcasts that I'm on. As you can tell, I very much am comfortable swearing. And also it talks about like adult themes, and it's Dungeons and Dragons. Like, you don't need people listening to that. And two, I need, with like my job versus content creation, and content creation versus my life, I need a little bit of privacy. I need a little bit of separation, so that way I don't get burned out and it's like one thing that everybody sees. And it's really interesting being neurodivergent and being content creators, that a lot of people don't realize that a lot of this stuff takes 110% for when for most people it could only take 75%. Or, some days it's like we can bang out 3 different edits for 3 different videos, and then the next day it's like we can barely move. And, I like I said, I have always wanted to have a place where I can authentically be myself, because for the longest time I couldn't. And I aspire for my community to be the same way. I aspire for them to be safe to be themselves. And there are multiple people who come into my, like when I go live on TikTok, that tell me that they feel like that, because I have a couple of followers who are transgender who aren't accepted by their families. And they tell, like, whenever I see one of my followers join my live, and I know who it is because they come to my lives often, I get really excited. And because, you know, I remember when I didn't have a following, and I would join a live or a Twitch stream of one of my favorite Twitch streamers or following people or whatever. And I would remember getting excited when they noticed me, and I would get excited that the community noticed me. And so I'm really inspired by a lot of that stuff, you know, like the deck hearts, for example, who Twitch stream and are video game voice actors. But it also, like, I have to remind people often, and sometimes even myself, that's not who I am entirely. And the people on the internet don't know me fully. And that is okay. It is okay for me to set those boundaries. It is okay for me to decide to cherry pick. Yeah, today you get to see what my life looks like, but tomorrow you don't get to. Or today you get to know how I'm feeling, but tomorrow I'm putting on that mask. And I think it's important that neurodivergent content creators have that ability to say, yo, you don't get to know this part of my life. Or really any content creators for that matter. Yo, you don't get to know that part of my life. Or, yeah, today I'm telling you that I'm feeling run down, but if I'm feeling the same way tomorrow, you might not necessarily get that because I'm choosing not to do that. And I think the downside to content creation and the downside to having a following that I have is that sometimes people cross that boundary and they feel like they truly know you. And that's where it gets scary. But I never, ever, 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 ever intentionally want to make someone feel like they are not seen by me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. And you gotta have the balance of the two, you know, having a personal life and, you know, for you can be authentic, you know, on screen. Yeah, and that's perfectly okay, but you gotta have your boundaries, you know,
Right.
because there's some things you just gotta it's really personal. You got to keep to yourselves, you know, and that's definitely okay. You know, there's some people that are willing to share more, but there's some that are just not ready for that. We're all on our journeys, and some people are just not ready for that step. And that's a part of acceptance, you know, and healing.
Right.
And that should definitely that's more than okay. You know, even my one of my favorite football content creators, Wyatt's World, he does a lot of funny skits and things like that. He made a video recently because he's been off for a couple months. He's been struggling with depression, things like that. He didn't get in super deep detail, but you know, you can tell he's struggling a lot, and I'm glad he's kind of taking that time for himself to give him that space because you can't always tell everyone what's going on every part of your life, you know, because
Right.
it's a battle that you're going through, and it's very hard to talk about. You know, for the longest time, for years, I didn't talk about my best friend when he passed away. You know, it was one of the hardest times in my life,
Right.
and everyone's going through that healing process. And when they're open to it, they can. But sometimes it's okay to have that privacy because obviously it's very personal, and there's a lot of people watching, and it can be difficult to talk about this thing. So I think when people sometimes can push that area, I think it's not always the best. You know, so
Right.
there always needs to be a balance. Obviously, the balance is different for each content creator, but I think it's always important. It's always good to remember, and we can do this with football players. You know, man, I put them on a pedestal, like, oh, like we know this person, and I feel so close to them, and that's okay to feel that at times, but not to almost to excessive level, you know,
No, right.
and almost not treat him like a human, you know, like you're any other person. Because no one wants to feel like that at all.
Right. No, it's, and like, you know, with the modern day content creation and social media, parasocial relationships are starting to get more and more apparent. And, you know, I've unfortunately had a couple of really scary instances of stalkers. I had one very, very recently. And that individual and I were friends before, and it got really scary really, really quickly. But you just, if I could give advice to like anybody about anything, especially content creation or like following their dreams. And it's ironic because it's not even my own advice. It's advice that I got from Johnny Stanton. And it's, if there's pushback, if there's something that is trying to keep you from doing it, that's how you know that you're doing the right thing. That's how you know that you're doing what you're supposed to do, because nothing should ever come easy.
Mm.
And I'm expanding upon what he said, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, but there's always, I think when you are on the right road, there's always going to be major setbacks. There's always going to be something that tries to stop you from getting there, whether it's the way that people act, whether it's technical difficulties, whether it's whatever. And I think it's just because it makes it all the more sweeter when you actually get there. So,
You know what actually hit me deeply because I like honestly I'm actually working on becoming the motivational speaker for the autism community
that's so
and
cool.
I'm it's honestly I didn't really think much about it for a long time. Back when 2021, I was 21 and I was getting a little wild drinking, but I wanted to be a speaker and I really got it. Like back then I was very intense with it. Like I was doing everything I can, hours on hours of trying to like be this figure, and in my personal life, I was going extreme working out and fastings, things like that, which didn't end up too well a couple months later. But it didn't come until years later. And I feel like I'm in a position, I'm a little bit in the healthier mindset and yeah, and just a healthier mindset and more of a balanced lifestyle now. And it didn't come until I really met this person that sponsored my podcast. I mentioned earlier, but Lynn from Team Awesomeness, she helps autistic adults. 80% of autistic adults are employed, so what she's doing is absolutely incredible. And she got me onto this international autism conference in April, and I'm like, what? I'm going to be a speaker?
That's so cool.
I was like
Congrats.
super shocked. I was like, what? But it's been difficult, because I've never speak in public before, like officially speaking, and I've been racking my brain, like I'm reading books, I'm going to Toastmasters at my church, and I'm doing all these things, and part of me still feels like, what if I'm not good enough to go on that stage? What if I'm just like I just go flat? It might be all
Yeah.
in my head, but I just go flat. And what you said is perfect. I think this goes for everybody. If it's hard, you're on the right path because you're challenging
And
yourself and you're growing.
like as an actor, like obviously I've had similar moments when I was the lead on my very first musical. We were the first musical, or we were the first live performance to open its doors to live audiences after COVID in Minnesota, and that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody. So my advice always for people who are like speaking for the first time or are nervous about speaking, they say to picture the audience in their underwear. Don't do that, you'll get distracted. Don't do that, you'll get distracted. Don't look at the audience, look above the audience. Because if you look above the audience, like just not like above, but like slightly
Whoa,
above their
look at that
heads.
roof.
Yeah, just like look up at the roof. No. I mean, if you
This
do, I
man
mean,
on
listen, if
something.
that's what you got to do, but look slightly above the audience, because then they're still in your peripheral vision, but you don't get freaked out when you make eye contact with them, because you won't make eye contact with them. And then once you get more comfortable, then you can look down and like scan the crowd, but do it like looking slightly above them. It feels like to the audience that you are looking at them, but you're keeping yourself in a position where you're not going to get too nervous if somebody makes eye contact with you, or if you happen to land on that one person that's on their phone or is not paying attention, because we've all been there where you're presenting a line or doing whatever and you look down and somebody's on their phone and you're like, oh, well, I'm so glad that you're paying attention, and it throws you off. But yeah, I always give the advice, look slightly up, don't look actually down at them until you feel comfortable. And genuinely, um adrenaline can get you so far. Adrenaline can get you so far as long as you know how to hone in on it properly. And flashcards are always great. I mean, obviously, as an actor, I can't really use them, but like if you have flashcards and you try to memorize them as best as you can, it totally helps when the adrenaline kicks in, because then in case you start stumbling, your mind is on autopilot. So
And I think writing things down is always like that's why every podcast, even though I know I'm good, I know what I'm talking about,
yeah,
or at least the topics I'm going to talk about. It's always good to write them down so it's just in your brain. Like, okay, it's for me, I'm not sure if it's just autism saying, but it's always like it almost gets burned in my brain what I'm going to talk about when I write it. It's like
yeah,
okay, it's almost like I'm writing in my mind, and I think that's just always good to do. No matter like if you're like going to Toastmasters or sayings that you're just trying to learn as much as you can, even though you might only write that one thing, because
right,
that's going to help you much more than you think it will.
right. Totally agree.
But this has been an awesome podcast. Like I really, really was excited for you to come on, and I'm just really honored and grateful that you came on.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, like I said, I'm so excited we were finally able to do this, and I'm sorry about my silly little time blindness earlier today. We'll have to do this again because this was genuinely a lot of fun. And like I said, this is the first time somebody's actually like asked me all these questions, so I'm like, oh shoot, I feel all special and important. So thank you so much, Gage. I genuinely had so much fun. We genuinely have to do this again.
Oh, I'm definitely going to invite you again because that next time I want to talk more about your teacher experience because I didn't talk too much about that, but it's
Yeah.
definitely something I want to talk about next time. And it's like I said, that your journey is very inspiring, and I'm sure like people listening, it's going to be inspired by and motivated. And yeah, it's great to get to know the Spitfire of the Vikings coda.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Gage. I can't wait to be on again.
I'm looking forward to it. Much love to you all.
Thanks. Have a good night.
You too.